Hey again, it's Christina from Sunshine Flora. If you're new to my channel, I grow cut flowers in Zone 5A in Northwest Iowa. And in this video, I want to share with you guys my 2023 garden plan. Now, I think that I almost have it finalized. There may be a couple tweaks here and there after this, but it is pretty much finalized. So this video is also going to be broken up into two different parts just because I don't want it to get super long for you guys. So in this video, I want to share with you my plan for the current spaces that I have been gardening in for the last couple years. So I have a roughly 30 by 50 fenced in garden area where I grow a main majority of all of my crops. On the outside of my fence, I have kind of a cottage garden area that I plan out every year and cut from. And then I also have another 96-foot bed where all of my pumpkins grew last year. I have a little bit of an adjusted plan for that this year that I want to share with you guys. And then in part 2 of this video, I want to share with you my whole plan for my hoop house. That will be going up in the spring because I did not get it up in the fall. So I have a whole entire plan for my hoop house for what I am planting and the different succession plantings that I have going in there. And then I also want to share with you in part 2 about the other additions and developments that I want to put out in the area where the hoop house is going. I'm planning on adding more bed space around it as well. And I'm just really excited about that whole layout. But if I did that in all one video, this would be like the longest video ever. So this is part 1, and in this one I want to share with you the existing areas that I have been planting in every single year so far. Okay, so let's just dive into it. So as I go through this, I will put pictures up on the screen of the space so that you guys can see exactly what it looks like if you are new to my channel, and then you can see how it has looked the last couple years as well. I also am sitting at my computer because I have a whole diagram put together in Photoshop that I will put up on the screen, and you guys are probably going to think I'm crazy that I do this every year. It is to the inch in Photoshop, color-coded, labeled. That is the excessive planner in me. So first I want to put some pictures up on the screen to show you the space, and then we'll get into how I'm changing it around for this year compared to last year. Okay, so I'm going to talk as these pictures are up on the screen. These are a few different views of the space. Again, this area is roughly a 30 by 50 fenced in area. It is downtown in my small town in Northwest Iowa, right next to my business. This is where I sell all of my cut flowers out of. I also have been a professional photographer for 20 years, so the building also runs as my studio. The space itself is right off Main Street, so it's a really great location for retail. It's a half a block from the local farmers market that I do every single Tuesday. I'm also the market manager, so it's nice and close to that, and it just works really, really great as a space. This lot used to have a building on it, but it was torn down years ago, like before I even lived in town here. I grew up about 10 minutes away. My husband grew up here, and so I have no memory of there ever being a building on that lot. It has always just been an empty lot full of weeds. When I purchased my building about 6 years ago, I also bought that lot, and I have developed it ever since. So here is a view facing west, and you can see that I have one big planting area down the center and some planting areas off to the sides, and right in the center is my greenhouse. This is a 6 by 10 hobby greenhouse. It is the Outsunny brand. I use it for holding flowers, hardening off my seedlings, and just doing other projects throughout the year. I think it really cozies up that space, and I absolutely love how it looks. Last year, in front of the greenhouse, I planted those 2 small little beds with Rudbeckia. That is my plan again for this year. Rudbeckia is a perennial in my area, and so I'm hoping that most of those plants will be coming back this year. Some of them I'm going to be tearing out because there were a few varieties that I didn't really care for last year. They just didn't get a tall enough stem length. So I'm going to be starting more Rudbeckia seed this year and then planting in those spots where I take the plants out. I also have another area where I'm going to be putting some Rudbeckia in, which I will share that with you also. Let me just give you a quick look of what the other beds in this garden space look like, and then I'm going to put a diagram up on the screen and show you my plan for everything. So on the opposite side of the greenhouse to the west, last year I had planted rows of zinnias. So I had 4 rows of zinnias, which you can see all the holes in the landscape fabric. It filled in completely. It was so awesome. I absolutely loved having that big mass area planted with zinnias. So I plan to do that very similar this year. However, on the very west end of the bed, closest to the fence, I had 1 row of dahlias. Those zinnias grew at a faster rate than the dahlias did, so they got taller sooner, and they shaded out those dahlias. So those dahlias not only did not get as tall as they were supposed to grow, they did not get the blooms that they were supposed to. So this year I'm gonna swap them. The zinnias, I'm still going to do rows, but I'm going to shift those down to the west. And then the dahlias, I'm going to put a little bit closer on that other end to the greenhouse. And you'll see that when I put my diagram up. So then to the north of that center planting area, which is on the south side of my building, I have a long bed that runs the whole length of the building. And you'll see there's an air conditioner in here. To the west of the air conditioner was a dahlia patch, and that worked pretty good last year. In front of the air conditioner was a little patch of yarrow. And then as you keep looking west, I had some feverfew, ageratum, and then it went into a really nice big status patch. Those all grew absolutely amazing last year. So I'm just making minor changes in that spot for this year. Then if you keep moving west, there is a raised bed, which was the first thing that I put on this lot 6 years ago. I'm working on bettering the soil in that. It was pretty compacted, and when I built that raised bed, I never thought about putting cardboard down. I just put the dirt on top of the grass. Never do that, because you will have grass growing up through there, like crabgrass is what I have, forever. So last year I ended up covering it with landscape fabric for probably about 8 or 9 months out of the year. And then when I took that off, it had killed it all off. But I was digging up the dirt and removing the roots. And so it's in better shape, but I need to do a lot of amending to actually better the soil, so it's soil and not just dirt. But this year, that bed, last year because I was working on the soil, I didn't take advantage of it and barely had anything planted in it, which a 6 by 20 spot is a pretty big area you can fit a lot of plants into. So I have a definite planting plan for that spot this year. Then to the south of that main planted area, which is on the north side of the building next to me, which is part shade, I have this big wooden door that I'll use as a photography backdrop, but I also have that full area planted. Last year I had Dara in there, I had Bupleurum, which grew well, I have a huge area of yarrow that's doing really well, and then I do have 4 incredible hydrangea plants. I'm definitely keeping those there. Those I do not cut off of. Those are pretty much just to be pretty in that corner, but I will keep those in there. Then as you kind of circle around next to that fence, I have my raspberry patch. That is gonna stay. And then in the other corner, the fence zigzags because there is a big gate there. So on the other zigzag on that east side of the fence, there is a long bed. I believe it's about 4 by 15 feet long, and that is filled with celosia. And then here is my pergola, which was built last year, which I am still absolutely in love with. Here's a before picture. That is what it looked like before. And here's the after picture. I am so happy with that transformation. So that is just a cute little nook. Last year I actually thought about having some bouquet bars in there, but I was selling so many flowers, I just was so busy and didn't have enough to do bouquet bars. And so I'm hoping this year, with this plan that I'm going to share with you in like 10 seconds, I have more flowers. And then also with the addition of my hoop house, I really would like to offer at least 2 or 3 bouquet bars in the garden or next to the hoop house this summer. Okay, so I'm going to put my diagram up on the screen now, and don't think I'm a crazy person. Here it is. So as you can see, it is totally color coded, and I have it turned horizontal so that you guys can view it really easily on the screen. So the top is north. So it definitely makes sense that way. But you can see that long bed right in the center. The big black rectangle is my greenhouse. You can see on the east side of the greenhouse, which is the actual front of the greenhouse, it's labeled Rebecca, so I'm keeping that the same. On the north and the south side of the greenhouse, those two beds are going to be snapdragons, which I have grown those there previously, and they grow absolutely perfectly there. Then on the west side of the greenhouse, this is one spot that I am just not sure about yet, which is why it says sunflower ? So last year, this particular bed I filled with basil. I grew 3 different kinds because I thought basil was going to be the best filler I had ever grown, and I was going to use it all the time. Well, I did not love it, and I don't think I really used hardly any of it. And so that entire bed pretty much went to waste for me last year. So this year, I want to make sure that I really utilize that prime spot in my garden. Whether I do a small succession planting of sunflowers there, or I'm actually thinking maybe of shifting some Lisianthus from another spot to that spot. So everything else is pretty much set in stone except for that bed. That is the one place that is still kind of a question mark. But otherwise, everything else is pretty much figured out. So just to put this diagram back up on the screen, you're looking at the sunflower ? bed. To the left of that, or to the west, you'll see that I have 2 rows of dahlias and 3 rows of zinnias. So this is that big long middle bed that was filled with the dahlias and zinnias last year. I have just flip-flopped them. And I'm actually having just 3 rows of zinnias instead of 4, and I'm doubling my dahlias that go in this space this year. So I'll have 48 dahlia plants in this space and then 3 big rows of zinnias. Now to the north, you'll see another blue box that says zinnias. That is in the 6x20 bed where I have been redoing the soil. So I still want to have the same amount of zinnias as I grew last year. So I'm additionally putting those in that space. The little HH that is in the very upper left-hand corner, I'm thinking of planting a hollyhock just for decoration right in that extreme corner. And then the orange box that is to the right of that blue box of zinnias, right by corn at the back, I'm thinking of planting just 1 row of sweet corn at the very back against my hot metal building because I think it'll grow very well there. I'm thinking of putting one of my succession plantings of sunflowers in that spot, and that should hold about 250 sunflowers. If you continue to move to the right or to the east, you'll see that I have status. So that area is where I planted status last year. I also had ageratum in that area, but I'm moving those into another space. So I will have 92 status plants in that area. The next purple area will be 24 plants of feverfew. And then the black box is my air conditioner. We're keeping on moving to the right. And then I have that little yarrow patch that's existing. And then the light purple rectangle to the very right where it says fabric, Lizzie ? That is a spot where I had some dahlias last year, and I am thinking about turning that into one big Lisianthus bed. So if I planted Lisianthus in that spot, I would plant them about 4 inches apart, and I would definitely add landscape fabric to that spot. And in that particular area, I think I could fit 175 Lisianthus, which would be perfect. If I do not put Lisianthus there, I would put Lisianthus over in the bed next to my greenhouse that is the ? bed. And then I would find something else to put there. So those are kind of the 2 that I'm thinking about switching around so far. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much determined. So if we put the diagram back up on the screen one more time, you'll see in the very upper right-hand corner in the white, it says celosia. That is where I planted celosia last year, and I will plant it there again. Below that, you'll see 3 hot pink circles. That is my raspberry bed. And below that, across the bottom, you will see 4 bright blue circles. Those indicate my hydrangea bushes. I also have the word Lisianthus written across there, 120 ? I planted Lisianthus in this spot last year, and they did okay. So that would be like an optional overflow area for Lisianthus. And then if you keep moving to the left, you'll see yarrow. That is the established bed of yarrow that I have. I may transplant some astilbe into that area as well. And then the green box of Bupleurum, that is the area I grew Bupleurum in last year, and it did amazing. And then to the left of that is a little Dara patch that I will also grow this year. So that is the general layout of what my garden will be this year. I hope that wasn't totally confusing to you guys. I hope seeing that diagram kind of helped. And again, I have this to the inch, and so I know exactly how many rows and how many plants I can fit in all these spots. As far as spacing goes, and I'll just kind of look at my computer screen at the plants as I tell this to you guys. Zinnias and Status and Feverfew and Celosia I plant all at 9 inches apart. Lisianthus I mentioned I plant at 4 inches apart. Sunflowers I plant between 4 and 5 inches apart. Rudbeckia I had at 9 inches apart. Dahlias I will plant in a 3-foot bed, and I will put 2 rows of dahlias, so they will be I think I did them 18 inches apart this way, but then they were 12 inches apart this way. So the 2 rows are actually 18 inches apart. I think that's how I did that last year. Bupleurum I did it 6 inches apart. The Dara I actually didn't plant in landscape fabric. I just scattered seeds over the dirt and scratched it in, and it just came up with a nice full planting of Dara. So that worked really well. Oh, snapdragons. Snapdragons I tend to plant closer together. I did 5 or 6 inches last year, and that worked really, really good. Snapdragons like to be close. So that is that main planting area. I absolutely can't wait to get it planted this year, and I hope that this layout with how I have things kind of figured out takes advantage of all the spots as much as possible. So that is the fenced in area. On the outside of the fence to the east, I have developed a landscape area, and I'll again put pictures up on the screen, that I call my cottage garden area. So this entire area is about 30 feet wide, and it's anywhere from 8 to 15 feet deep because it kind of curves. This whole area is landscape fabric, and I have it planted up more like landscaping and not cut flower beds. So in the space for perennials, I already have yarrow and echinacea and rudbeckia. There is catmint, Russian sage, black-eyed Susan. There was some Monarda, but that didn't come back last year, so I had to dig that out. I have a few daisies planted in there. So I really would like to develop this with some more perennials, maybe some more echinacea, some more yarrow plants, but then I also supplement this with annuals as well. And so I pretty much plant this as close together as possible so that the whole area is just one tightly planted kind of cottage gardeny area. And then I do have that trellis in the very middle. It's actually a Titan squash tunnel. It's from Gardener Supply. And last year I grew miniature pumpkins on that I sold at the market. So I probably will do that again this year. So as far as what I am adding new into that space this year, I'm going to start some more echinacea, daisies, and yarrow from seed, and I want to put more of that in there. And then the rest of the spots I'm going to fill with annuals. I had a lot of annuals in there last year, so there is room for more annuals this year. I'm going to put cosmos probably along the fence, which is what I did last year. I put some celosia in there that I actually get at a garden center, and it's one that I just use for foliage. So I will have an entire row of that again this year. And then scattered in kind of some circular patches, I do gomphrena, I do marigolds, straw flowers, asters. I'm probably going to put a couple plants of mahogany splendor hibiscus, and then I'll put a little bit of amaranth too. Those I also put against the fence because then they can get nice and tall. I also would love to find another area on my property, which this may be in video 2, to put maybe a whole row of mahogany splendor hibiscus. I know those get just so huge, but I just feel like I need more of that in my life. So watch for video 2 on that. But that whole cottage garden area is just so beautiful because it's so densely planted. I use it for photographs, It's a great view when people drive down the alley behind the back of my building, and it's just so easy to cut from. So I really, really utilize that for my cutting as well. So then the last area that I want to talk about in part 1 is my pumpkin bed. And this is actually out in my parking lot, which if you're new to my channel, you're probably thinking, what, she's planting in her parking lot? Well, it was an area of grass and weeds. It was mostly just weeds that is along the neighboring building, which is a co-op. So I covered it all with cardboard. We put some railroad ties in. We don't plant any edibles in this spot. So that is why I was okay with just using railroad ties. I needed something really, really strong in that area because it's up against rock. But we filled it with organic garden mixes. I put the cardboard down first, and then that is where I planted all of my pumpkins. This bed is about 3 to 4 feet deep, and it is 96 feet long. So it is a huge planting area. It is right up against a metal building, so it faces south. So it is really, really hot. So the pumpkins, as long as they stay nice and watered, they just love it and vine out, and they just get absolutely huge. So my plan is to plant pumpkins there this year also. Now, last year I also put my very first succession planting of sunflowers in this spot. So I actually planted the sunflowers just a little bit, maybe a week before the pumpkins. So I put the sunflowers in one long row closest to the building, so they were at the back of the bed. And then the pumpkins I spaced 4 feet apart and put a little bit more towards the front of the bed. So the sunflowers were at the back of the bed growing up. So side view, the sunflowers were at the back of the bed growing up, and the pumpkins were here vining out. So I was able to harvest sunflowers, and the pumpkins could grow, and neither one of them bothered each other. It was like the best use of space possible. So this year I'm using it for 3 crops. Last fall, along the very front of that bed, I planted about 400 daffodils. And so the whole 96 feet has daffodils. And if you know, so daffodils, when you grow them for cut flowers, you do not treat them as annuals like you do for tulips. So those, the daffodils will stay in there every single year, and they will actually naturalize and kind of multiply under the soil. Daffodils will bloom very, very early in the spring. I'll harvest those, and then when the foliage is dying back, that's when I'll plant my pumpkin seeds in the middle of the bed, and then the pumpkins vines will just vine out over top of the dying back daffodil foliage, and then I'll still be able to plant my first succession planting of sunflowers at the back of the bed. So I'll first harvest the daffodils, then I'll harvest the sunflowers, and then at the very end of the season, I'll harvest all my pumpkins. So I'm getting 3 uses out of that same planting space every season. I think it's gonna work so good. And daffodils is something that adds to my spring harvest list with my tulips. So that is a really, really good way to add more income to that very beginning of the season. Now the parking lot area that is in front of where all of my pumpkins are growing, that is the area that I am developing where my hoop house will go and additional bed space will go. So part 2, you will see my diagram for how all of that will be laid out and my plans for all of that planting, which I absolutely cannot wait to share with you guys. I have been making little changes, and I first had it laid out and I thought I was getting a lot in there, and then I rotated a few things and like doubled the beds I was able to fit in the space, and I will show you guys all of that. But I am really excited, and there also is, which I'll show you in the next video, there's a huge existing concrete area right behind my building too. And so I feel like that could become kind of a sitting area, and that could become where I have my bouquet bar, and then people could walk around the garden, and it could just be like a really nice evening in the garden with flowers. So anyway, I'm gonna cut this video off, and I probably will go ahead and film video 2 right now because it's all in my brain. But you should see part 2 in a few days after you see this one, and then you will see my whole garden plan for the summer. So anyway, stay tuned for part 2 really soon.